It has been a ridiculously long time since there has been any kind of video recap of A Season for All Things, our ongoing RuneQuest 6 campaign set in a world of our own creation, a collaborative exercise between myself and the players, all of which is detailed in various posts on the Casting Shadows blog and this video playlist. Except in the video playlist, the recaps have been lacking. In fact, there hasn't been one since session 8, and yesterday we completed session 18. There's no way I can cover all of the events that happened in the last 10 sessions. But let's try to put things in some perspective. When we finished, the characters had survived their journey across the Desert of Screams and made it to the destination point of the pilgrimage that they had been on. They made it to the High Temple. And as soon as they got there, well, of course, being a small number of survivors and connected to the horrible confluence of events that had been going on around them during the time of their journey, they were treated like celebrities. But as each session went on, they realized that their celebrity status was having a distinct effect on the community in which they had arrived, this very religious international community, which, although on the surface it seemed to be a cohesive unit united under this ageless patriarchal figure, well, of course, underneath all of that, there were political wars going on, faction versus faction, jockeying for influence, position, this council or that council, or an inner sanctum, an inner group. And well, of course, they didn't really want to have anything much to do with all of that. From their perspective, the world is ending right now. Let's solve this problem. And in the background, in the shadows behind them, people were still jockeying for position. They spent quite a long time in the High Temple, partly because they were having difficulty getting the information that they needed out of these different factions. Everybody wanted advantage. People were seeking to ally with them or manipulate them in some way. And in fact, it turned out that by dealing strictly with the patriarch, although they didn't really have the social graces to do that without causing friction, only by doing that were they able to accomplish the things which got them in motion. Also interesting for me was the fact that this patriarchal figure was ancient. This comes from a character group called the Blessed. And one of their characteristics is that at some point in their life, they were marked by the gods as exemplary, and so have been made immortal and, I'm not going to ageless, but I also want to say changeless. They have been set aside as an example to the rest. This patriarch is one such figure and has risen to be the patriarch of all the religions in the firmament, all the religions in the known world, to all the species of men. All right? So you would think that maybe they would take his advice seriously, and of course they did, but it's interesting to me that every suggestion that he made, they ended up going counter to. He suggested that it seemed likely that although they've been started to be called the Chosen Ones, right, both for their survival and because of their insights, the visions that they were shown, but he suggested that they were chosen to be messengers, heralds, right? Summoners of all the forces of law to converge together and rise up against the massing forces of chaos. They have taken it upon themselves to quest for answers. I think this is particularly cool. There's nothing particularly heroic about most of the cast of characters. You could definitely argue that Gorwyn is growing into a hero. We'll talk about him in a bit. And you could definitely say that Turgid was cast in a heroic mode or mold. But at the start of play, we have an outcast, we have a servant, we have someone that everyone suspects is a pirate. But where are the stout defenders of law? Where are the heroic warriors? Where are the leaders of men? Where are the absent, completely absent? There are none of these characters. These are regular people in a terrible situation who choose heroism. And I love it when that happens. Love it. It's why I like campaigns so much rather than short run stories. I love to see the sort of character development arise. Partly accidentally, partly on purpose. The interplay between what the player wants and hopes about what the character can actually perform, and the way that both of those things connect to the events in the world. It's great. They could have taken it easy on themselves. They could have been sent back the way they came, back to the kingdoms of men, back to the enclaves of the blessed, back to the deeps of the Plenthans, back to the havens of the Phydrans, up to the endlessly morphing and twisting Ares of the Illyrans. But no, they march alone straight into the teeth of chaos, and I love them for it. It's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the characters. Now, I'll talk about the character Wakefield first. This is the suspected pirate, the known sailor, and possible leader of men. Because, unfortunately, we've lost this character. Not to death, as you might suspect when you hear the name RuneQuest, but sadly just to the effect of life on Wakefield's player. He's unable to make these sessions anymore. And so, Wakefield has slipped off into a different storyline. And this is a storyline that I would like to continue in some way, but it's going to have to wait for a little while. Now, Wakefield had a history to which he liked to allude. He had two different streaks to him. He loved to communicate. He loved to socialize and party, liked to meet people, understand things. But he also hated abuses of authority. Perhaps his time in prison brought that out of him. Now, one or maybe two cool stories about Wakefield are that he was a primary mover in the information gathering phase. They had arrived at the temple, and Gorwyn was spending more and more time away from the group, and Turgid and Wakefield were together. And they went to various meetings with the patriarch and other religious leaders, and very quickly they wanted to be able to gain access to the Great Library, which is rumored to be the best, most complete library assembled anywhere in the known kingdoms. And Wakefield managed, against all odds, to navigate the political minefield of the different conversations of gaining access to the secret and restricted areas of the High Temple. He got them access.
Not only that, but he managed to strike a chord with the librarian, the chief librarian, who was an old campaigner from way back from near Wakefield's hometown. And the two of them drop into their local dialect and start talking about places from home and start talking about all the things that old campaigners talk about. And that was great. And so eventually they were allowed inside a mystery which had been vexing the higher ranks in the temple. And that was that an ambassador from a young and aggressive, expanding kingdom, which had been absorbing its smaller neighbors over the last few generations, and had, in the last generation, actually taken the holy city, which is where this pilgrimage starts from. The holy city had always been supported by all nations equally. It was off limits for the political squabbles of the people of the firmament, but not anymore. And nobody opposed this action. And little by little, they've been putting their influence into what is acceptable in terms of religious leadership. The separation of church and state is being diminished with each passing year. So, the ambassador from Baelrath had been visiting and had offended enough people that he ended up getting banished, sent back to his king. Right? But he didn't take that lying down. He actually stole very important, very old, the earliest, in fact, maps of the known world from the temple. And very close to that time, the sun had frozen in the sky. So they hadn't been able to catch his contingent as he fled across the desert of screams. The rise of chaos, they hoped that he would just fall to the forces of chaos and they would be done with him. But he had stolen these maps, and it was these maps in particular that Wakefield and Turgid felt that they needed. And it's good that they continued to seek them, because that has definitely guided the rest of their decisions. So Wakefield didn't want to let this go. And through his influence and through Turgid's solid relationship with the mercenary company, the Order of the Horizon, particularly with the local commander named Eastrel, they were shown a great secret of the Order of the Horizon. The fact that they have these enormous black avian mounts. They fly on these massive black birds and ride out against the forces of chaos. Well, Eastrel agreed on one of his patrols through the mountains bordering the Desert of Screams. He would take Wakefield and Turgid with his squad and see if they could find this ambassador. They did so. And combat ensues, as you would expect, and we got to try out the very cool ranged combat rules and all the interesting special effects that go with using longer weapons like javelins and spears, so impales and pinning people to the ground, and so that was pretty exciting. But while this battle's going outside with Turgid and the mercenary company versus the soldiers of the ambassador, Wakefield has done an end run around everybody, snuck into the ambassador's closed wooden wagon, and is taking on the ambassador himself. And you have to imagine this scene. I mean, this is a character that has been portrayed through the whole campaign as as biting his tongue. Right? He's got all this stuff he wants to say, but he holds back. And while he's rough around the edges, and he's obviously weathered from a life outdoors, and all the marks you'd expect to have from a professional sailor, he's done his best to be a good pilgrim. He's done his best to be devout to the vision he's had of the horrible things that chaos is going to do, and his resistance to that. He's going to stand up against chaos. He's doing his best, but when face to face with this selfish, gluttonous, brutal, evil man, he loses it. And there's a horrible knockdown, drag-out brawl using daggers in close quarters on this guy's table, and just cutting him. Where's the map? Where's the map? And the guy who is also a spell user is trying to defend himself with the only thing he can with his magic, but he's not fast enough. And Turgid keeps cutting him and cutting him and cutting him, and finally finishes him off and tears his wagon apart looking for his treasure hoard, of course, finding the maps. Everybody goes back to the high temple. None of this is discussed. He comes out of the wagon. I found the map. he's covered in blood, and nothing's said. And it is hoped that the Aileron king will believe that bandits attacked, and it's very likely. And with the political spin that Easter will put on it, likely this will be the official report, was the ambassador was killed by bandits. But the truth was never really discussed. What happened inside that wagon? So they go back. We recovered the map. They return it to the chief librarian. He's very happy, and he explains to them, he translates for them all of the glyphs which were on the original map, which leads them to this very, very important clue about the Tower of the Dawn. And this becomes the focal point of their quest. It's become the focal point of Turgid's quest. So let's talk about Turgid. Turgid is not human. He's our non-human character. So he's Plinthon, which is very, very similar to humanity. But there are some visible differences, but maybe mostly cultural differences. Now, this is a group that has been banished far in the history of the world, banished to living underground. They were accused by their patron deity for having violated the principles that they were supposed to guard, and they were denied the surface world. So, living underground, they are among the only races on the firmament that have maintained a direct war with chaos. The forces of chaos sometimes come bubbling up from beneath, and strange things, of course, lurk beneath the earth in the darkness. Now, what's possibly unusual about a particular campaign world that we've developed is that it's not a planet. It's mostly a shapeless mass under a crystal dome. Now, above the crystal dome, they assume, is heaven, the realm of the gods. But below the firmament is chaos. And chaos sometimes comes up through the cracks. Now, the world, the firmament, is heated from below. The deeper down you go underground, the warmer it gets. The surface is temperate. The higher up you go, such as into the mountains, the colder it gets. Right? Up by the crystal dome, you would assume it would be freezing. Across the crystal dome, daily, igniting and being extinguished, is the sun. The sun has been hanging around the 10 o'clock position now for months. when chaos broke free, the sun was frozen in the sky. This has been the primary theme. It has not been night for months. The sun doesn't provide heat, it only provides this cold white-blue light. So the Plinthans live underground. They live in the warm, dark stone caverns of the firmament. Their god had punished them to go deeper into the earth to reestablish some kind of connection with what it was that they were supposed to defend and protect. They have a very rich culture. They also have this very stoic streak to them. There's a warrior culture, and there's a priestly culture, which is slowly taking over more and more administrative duties. They're laying down more and more dogma about what is and is not acceptable in the eyes of their god, and yet they continue to be condemned to living underground. Turgid is an outcast, sent out from them for embracing a heretical idea. He goes on the pilgrimage hoping to find answers. Right? He's called to the pilgrimage. You cannot just join. You must be called. He's summoned to the pilgrimage, which gives him hope. Maybe these heretical beliefs of mine are not heretical. When he arrives at the High Temple, he's greeted with a lot of respect by the high priests of the Plinthan religious orders, which also is hopeful. He's able to draw on a lot of his cultural background to explain some of the things which are going on around them. And he's a warrior. He's a noble. He's a warrior. He is able to command respect, but at the same time, we're felt when we meet Turgid, or we see him in a scene, that perhaps he doesn't respect himself, or perhaps he lacks confidence. He worries about failure. He has a very dark sense of humor, but he never gives up, no matter how bleak things get. He's always there to help rescue someone in need, even to his own peril, and he's often surprised when that favor is returned. He's a complex, interesting character. So, Turgid, learning about the Tower of the Dawn, realizing that a lot of factors have been pointing to this place as important. See, they know that there are these secret temples scattered throughout the firmament where these stones, these keystones, are kept. And what started their journey in the first place was the disappearance of the main stone that was holding chaos at bay, the keystone in the enchantment that imprisoned chaos. The chaos dragon has broken free, is what they've heard, and it was the theft of this stone which enabled it. They heard that the large Phaedron city, which is this massive city of the arts under the ocean, kept safe in a bubble of air by the power of their deity. They've heard it's been destroyed, which suggests to them that the stone that governs water has been stolen. What else has been stolen? Right. How many of these stones has the enemy been able to obtain? Where were they hidden? Why can no one remember where they were hidden, even those who are supposed to protect them? This is driving Turgid crazy. And he's been working very hard trying to figure out where in the firmament they would have been placed. This Tower of the Dawn, he feels, can give him the answers that he seeks. What further complicates this is that the Tower of the Dawn, they have learned, is the place where the nomads of the high plateaus far above the Desert of Screams, where they go for their rites of adulthood, where they become adults. This is a huge and very warlike group of nomads, different tribes coming together, separating, warring with each other, warring with their neighbors, that sort of thing, roaming across these vast grasslands. And they've learned from the patriarch that nobody knows what side the nomads are on, and his suspicion is that they have allied themselves this time with the forces of chaos. He feels that the nomads have fallen from stout defenders of law to supporters of chaos. How can this be? How can it be stopped? In fact, he's pushing and pushing and pushing through many of the sessions for them to embark on a sea voyage in this underground sea, the Sunless Sea, which was recently discovered beneath the desert. He's built ships. He needs captains for them. And this is where Wakefield ends up going, being one of the captains to take these ships across the Sunless Sea to sail under the massing forces of chaos, find a way up into the high plateaus and deal with the nomads, persuade them to come back, if indeed they have left, come back to the force of law. Turgid doesn't feel that a diplomatic mission is for him. He also feels that it's incredibly dangerous, and while he doesn't shirk away from danger, is this really what he's being called to do? Should he go back to the Plenthyn Deeps? Should he go back to the deep from which he came, or should he visit one of the other deeps and try to persuade them to do something? He writes letters hoping that people will listen to him. But this clue about the Tower of the Dawn, this galvanizes him into action. He makes another deal with Eastrel for transport. He gathers allies. He finds Gorwyn. He recruits lords from the mountains, hard-bitten men used to suffering, who love a good fight and despise the idea of chaos. He recruits them to his cause, and they go off, this very tiny band, to find the Tower of the Dawn. The last of the three original characters is Gorwyn, who actually starts play as a slave. He's a member of a cult, right? The Forsworn. And his understanding of this cult is that they train people to become bodyguards to the elite bodyguards to the elite, who lay down their life for their patron. They call them patrons, not masters. And he doesn't really have a concept, I think, that he has been a slave for his whole life. Still extremely loyal to his oath. And very early in the campaign, his patron died a truly awful death. They had locked him up in a room. He should have been safe there. They went to investigate to make sure there were no further threats. They've been attacked by this horrific chaos creatures, so they didn't want to risk him falling as collateral damage during a combat. So they lock him up in this very safe place. They go and explore the rest of the temple. They come back and they find that he has been dissolved into a pudding-like mass that was still alive and screaming, and so he had to, for mercy's sake, put down his own patron. Crisis of faith, which has only been partly alleviated by the development of this passion to oppose what chaos has done. But a stronger passion to avenge his patron has been burning within him, and so once the group gets mired in the politics at the High Temple and is trying to get information, trying to cause action, trying to do anything, what is Gorwyn to do? Well, of course, he's not the only member of the Forsworn in such a place. All of these high nobles and religious figures are similarly protected by this cult. And so he's sent home. No matter what his own personal views are, he's told he must return home. He must atone for what he's done, his failure to protect his patron, and he must be assigned to a new patron if he's allowed to survive that atonement. And so, Gorwyn steps out of the main events, and he walks across the Desert of Screams, surviving, climbs up into the mountains, and finds momentary peace with these mountain lords. And when Turgid comes looking for him, that is exactly where he is. He's, resting up because the mountain passes become impassable. Chaos is massing. They're boiling up out of the ground, through the mountains, and down into the Desert of Screams, above the High Temple. And no one knows how long it will be before that mass grows so large that it must spill out into war. And the Patriarch has been asking, where are the forces of law? Where is the army that will meet this massing force of chaos? How long can chaos be expected to maintain its order without erupting into the chaos of war? How long? Gorwyn, maybe not one for the philosophy, more for physical action, being a mystic warrior using mysticism from the RuneQuest 6 rules, which is an internally focused magic, making him into a physically adept warrior, almost monk, without any of the religious overtones of being a monk. And Turgid's arrival kind of directs him to what's important, his passion to oppose chaos. This is what must be done. All the patrons can be saved if we can stop the forces of chaos. So he happily joins this quest to the Tower of Dawn. So what is this quest? What's going on with the Tower of Dawn? How have we gotten there? They really don't know much about the tower itself. They don't even really know its location, because there's an annotation on the ancient map that Wakefield was able to recover from the thieving ambassador, and there's information that Turgid's been able to get from Eastrel and other sources, such as the Mountain Lords, that ties a lot of these things together. But everybody agrees that the tower is not a fixed point in space. And so once they translate all the glyphs on the map, they realize that it moves location every day. But now they know how to find it. The translation of the glyph tells them that they know where it is. And information that they get from the Mountain Lords reveals to them that its location is, of course, tied to the sun. And so they were able to put this together now, that the Tower of the Dawn is directly beneath the position of the sun. Now, where has always been a mystery. Where the sun's actual track is has always been a mystery, but the sun is frozen, and so too is the Tower of the Dawn. They know its position, and they're heading there. So through yet another negotiation with Eastrel, they receive another airlift, and their very small band is flown around the ring of mountains and deposited in what's supposed to be, it's indicated on the map as a mountain pass. And on the surface of things, it looks like a mountain pass, and the Order of the Horizon's massive blackbirds take off into the frozen sunlight, leaving them in what was actually a dry gulch, a dead riverbed. So they're on a quest to this tower. They know the tower is a site of immense cultural significance to this enormous marauding band of nomads, many of whom are pouring through the mountains as we speak to get there for their rite of passage or for other reasons. And while they know how to navigate their way there, nobody has any on-the-ground knowledge of this area except for a radical group, a fundamentalist group of Plinthans, Turgid's people, which he's been going back and forth. Do I try and meet them and gain their help in this time of need, or do I stay away from them so I don't endanger the mission? It's like, in what way are they fundamentalists? Are they the string up and burn the heretic type, or are they people that he can reason with? He's decided that their reputation suggests they are so hardline, he better stay away from them. And so they're on their own. They don't have any local guides. They don't have any detailed maps. They just know that this is a pass through the mountains, which will take them to the unknown terrain. Somewhere out there will be the Tower of the Dawn with whatever dangers it holds. This is the kind of people that these heroes, or these would-be heroes, are. So what has happened to them? They were deposited in the mountains, very arid, loose rock. They've been making their ascent up what would have been, rapids, and if the water were there. And a couple of days go by, they find that they are following a large band of nomads, and they're trying to catch up on their trail. And they meet the first, let's say, denizen of the area. This is a giant lizard. And their battle with this giant lizard who's hunting them leads them to discover this collapsed area of the mountain and this hole behind it, which leads into a tunnel. And it's like some forgotten complex dug deep into the mountain, into the warm depths of the mountain. But what really makes them curious is that it's supposed to be warm, and yet it is cool. It should be dry, and yet it is moist. So they investigate. While they're investigating the tunnels, the group is separated. So Turgid and the Mountain Lords are in one group, and Gorwyn is gone, missing. After a tragic death, the group is reunited once again in combat with a giant lizard. But this lizard is wearing a saddle. One of the Mountain Lords is horribly wounded. Turgid is horribly wounded, near death. But the group defeats the challenge. Gorwyn is reunited with them. And here they are in the dark in this massive complex that seems to have no ceiling, no walls. There's just this huge spiral staircase that they've come down, and a 10-meter wide icy canal that's blasting past at incredibly high speed, filled with water. Nothing else. The impossible nature of their situation weighs on them, and eventually this illusory appearance is dispelled, and they find themselves in still a very large underground room or complex, still with this icy water-filled canal, still with this massive central staircase, but with walls. And the walls are covered with these arcane, supposedly, glyphs, which they're trying to figure out, but all they can really tell is that these are glyphs of a reptilian people, kind of a cross point between a true glyph, pictorial language, and a more symbolic language that arises from it, as we see with modern Chinese. So what are we going to do with this language is a big question. Why is there a saddle on the reptile, the giant lizard, is another question. Are we down here by ourselves becomes the more important question, and enough evidence leads them to believe that there's somebody down here with them, perhaps another one of these reptilian assassins. Based on art and glyphs that they did kind of understand scattered throughout this complex, they get the sense that the reptilian society has warriors, has sorcerers, has religious leaders, has servants. It's a caste society, or a society like any other. And there's definite signs of worship of the forces of chaos. Their way is clear. If they're down here with someone from that culture, then they're down here with an enemy. So very carefully, very logically, with the kind of of care and cleverness, which has been a hallmark through this whole campaign, surviving perils that I really feel would have killed many other groups. They begin to map out this room in darkness. They've got one sputtering torch. Turgid is able to channel his heretical gifts to see in darkness, and working in tandem, they begin to figure out where everything is. Now, they are cold. They are tired. They are suffering from fatigue penalties to everything that they do. They haven't got to the point where they're slowed to inaction, but they're hurting. They're hungry. They've been through too much violence and too much stress recently, and they're in this place that doesn't make any sense. Bit by bit, they're moving through the room, and they recognize that they know where their opponent is hiding. Gorwin has this ability to sense, to become aware of things around him. He can pause, he can meditate, he can open himself to what is around him. And in this place, he realizes that this is very much like a temple. Right? This is the place where he and Turgid, who, although on a different path, they have some similarities in outlook. This is where they could meditate and become more in tune with themselves. In game terms, they could more easily recover their magic points. Right? Likewise, a sorcerer working here would be able to draw on, the magical potential of the place. In other games, this would be, where ley lines intersect. This is an important mystical place in the, let's say, the physical underpinnings of the firmament. This is a curious location. And by opening himself up to sensing this kind of emanation, Gorman becomes aware that their opponent, the person that's hiding from them, the person that has been casting this illusion that the place goes on and on forever, the person that's been messing with them for maybe a while, they know where he's hiding in the dark. So they split their force, they go around this massive spiral staircase, and they make a two-pronged attack on his location. Now, this sense of awareness is not a precise location finder. It's not a GPS coordinate to your enemy. They misjudge the distance a little bit, and as they're running through the darkness to close on him, he has enough time to work his magic. It's too dark for ranged weapons from the Mountain Lords, and so he's able to cast a fairly complicated spell, one which summons a creature of chaos through a horrible rift in reality, which again heightens the stress on the characters. As this being is pulling its way into this room, this under the mountain, the reptilian sorcerer is also protecting himself from harm. Now, very quickly in this engagement, they recognize that the chaos creature isn't particularly interested in serving the sorcerer. In fact, it tries to attack him, but find it cannot. And so in its fury, it turns its attention to the characters. So, already split into two prongs of an attack, they split their attack, with two of them focusing on the creature of chaos, and two of them trying to focus on dealing with the reptilian sorcerer. So we've got one of the Mountain Lords who uses hurlbats, these small throwing axes. He's trying to distract or shatter the concentration of the sorcerer, mostly to no avail. Gorwin, brave as the day is long, throws himself into unarmed combat, because he's an unarmed combat specialist, with this huge creature of chaos whose body is mostly fixed, but not entirely fixed. A creature of one great central eye and a
a spray of eyes down one side of its face and a mass of tentacles here, and ram's horns running down from its brow all the way down its back, widening out almost like a tortoise shell, but random and without any real coherence. One short muscle arm which seems to mutate or morph into a club. One longer kind of human arm with a human hand, which when extended becomes like this bone spear with writhing tentacles, and one leg with a knee joint that is familiar to them, but another leg which is all segmented, much like a dog's leg or a goat's leg, all in different angles, and it's shambling toward them slowly, and it's at times flaring with this ethereal light, this purple and black coiling energy, which they're not sure of. Gorwin throws himself into unarmed combat with this thing, which is towering over him, lunging in, striking it, doing damage, but himself being enveloped in this energy. And what does that mean? And we don't know yet what that means. But it's guaranteed to be unpleasant. He throws himself into combat. The Duke of the Mountain Lords, he throws himself into combat. They're wrestling with the chaos creature. Turgid is running and running. He's got his huge shield, he has his armor on, his big sword. He's trying to close. He's running and running and running and running and running, while the other lord is throwing his axes. First one axe misses. Second axe hits in the head. It's horrible wound. We're all like, is this it? Did he do it? It was a long range shot. It was difficult. Nails him in the head. The sorcerer is able to reverse this damage and return it to its caster. So now Tan, the Duke's loyal right-hand man, the last surviving of the Mountain Lords, he has his own wound directed back at him. His own head is horribly smashed. He keeps it together. He has this horrible head wound, but he's staying in the fight. Finally, Turgid rushes in. Gorwin, his arm impaled and torn to pieces by the spear-like appendage of the chaos creature, is in desperate straits. The Duke is hurt. He comes in, and together they finish off the chaos creature. As soon as it dies, it loses its right to be present in this reality. It breaks apart into plasm, which then very quickly boils off as Turgid rushes in and slams his blade down into the seated reptilian sorcerer, and definitely ending his life. Silence falls. And now, once again, they're left with a decision. What do we do? There is the look that passed between Gorwin and Turgid. Obviously, a look that passed between the two players. I guess we can't interrogate him now. And I think we've all been in that situation more than once in gaming. What do they do? How do they proceed from this? Do they press on to the Tower of the Dawn? Do they try and figure out what any of the symbols here mean? And our last scene of this session 18, was behind the sorcerer on the wall was the rune of water, making them wonder, was this the temple? Is this the temple where the runestone of water lies? Is it from here that control over that stone was taken? Is it from here that the destruction of the Phaedron nation was launched? What are they going to do next? I love the sense of anticipation, and I love the risks that these characters are taking for passion.